Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Adobe Live. I'm your host, Kieran Lewis, a freelance designer based in London. And today is part two with Adobe Live of video creator and photographer, Nathaniel Dodson. Feeling good today, Daniel? How you doing?
Yeah, feeling good, feeling great, feeling
Yeah,
better than good.
awesome. I'm excited to sort of see your process for day two, my buddy. As always, my friends, I love to see your comments in the chat. If you're on YouTube, perhaps, get us in the chat, share some love. I can see everyone coming in thick and fast. We've got Sam, Wade, Oliver, Aniki. Massive love to you guys. Of course, where you guys streaming in from, let us know in the chat. Always good to know where you guys are streaming from. And before we jump into the real nitty gritty of Nathaniel and his design process, just a few things to flag to you lovely people. If you haven't already, please subscribe, my friends, to our new Adobe Live channel on YouTube. And that way you can stay up to date with latest streams, participate in Adobe Live communities, and so much more. And also, don't forget to get involved with the Photoshop Creative Challenge hosted by Wade Cuff every weekday at 9 a.m. Pacific. So tune in, challenge yourself, and get sharp and creative. And on a final note, today's even more special, not because it's the Nathaniel's design process, but also we have an artist spotlight. So for you lovely people who don't know what that is, it's a segment towards the end of the stream where we show a bit of love to the community, but we won't say who. We'll keep it a nice surprise. But until then, Nathaniel, my man, this is your time. Would you like to introduce yourself and also what we're working on for part two of today?
Yeah, sure. So welcome back. Thanks for being here, day two. My name's Nathaniel Dodson. Some of you hopefully know who I am. Some of you don't, and that's all right. Keeps me humble. I am a commercial portrait photographer and a YouTuber. I'm not really sure which one. Right now, I'm more a YouTuber than a commercial photographer, but I do both. Just take pictures of people, and I've been doing it for about 10 years now, well, maybe 11 years actually. And this is the kind of stuff I do. I do some composites. I do a lot of environmental portraiture. That's my main thing, is bring the lights out, shoot on location. And I've been doing a little bit of video stuff as well. And then I have my YouTube channel that I run where I do Photoshop and Illustrator and Premiere Pro and After Effects and just all kinds of tutorials. If you're a logo designer, graphic designer, photographer, retoucher, there's probably going to be something for you here on the channel, as well as, if you do video stuff. So there's all of that, and then everything that comes with that in terms of social media, which I stink at. I didn't even post on Instagram. I'm remembering right this moment. Didn't even post on Instagram.
Nathaniel, that's blasphemy to my ears. I'm kidding. It's all good. It's all good.
I'm so bad at it. But yeah, so that's kind of what I do. And I have a whole lot of fun doing it. And it's, when I was growing up, I wanted to be a roofer, and instead I became a photographer. So I'm not really sure how all that happened, but sometimes your career takes paths and trajectories that you don't quite expect. And happy not to be a roofer, but all the respect in the world to those of us who are sweltering on the rooftops around the world, making sure we don't get wet when it rains. But yeah, so this is some of what I do, and
Nice.
Yeah, that's it.
I can imagine if there's a few roofers in the chat, all of a sudden they just kind of gather together now and just have a. You've opened the floodgates, no pun intended. But no, awesome. It's good to see your work as well. I know we'll put in the chat. We already have from our lovely moderator Wade links to our friends can kind of follow up with you, and obviously see you, of course, after the stream. But yeah, for day two, would you like to maybe give a little brief recap of yesterday and then kind of jump into?
Yeah, for sure. Let's jump over to Photoshop. Well, first and foremost, if you recall yesterday, if you were with us, we had a little technical issue at some point where the tablet caused Photoshop to freeze up. I think, famous last words, but I think I figured out why that happened, and it shouldn't happen again today. So that was a fun little experience yesterday. But other than that, what we did was we began with a number of images, and we basically started blending them together to build what amounts to a kind of a nice backdrop for our composite image, or what will end up being our composite image when we add our subjects to it. And to that point, we also created our own sort of gradient sky, just a nice, clean, commercial-looking sky. What else did we do? A little bit of horizon glow. And then we began cutting out our subject here, which these are all Adobe Stock photos.
Nice.
We began cutting them out. Today we're going to make a cut around her hair.
Mm.
We're going to adjust the lighting, adjust the ground they're standing on. You can see there's some mismatched color, things like that. We're going to do some digital relighting. We're going to be adding some atmosphere to this image. We're going to add some birds or bats or whatever they look like at a distance.
Dramatic wedding, I love it.
Right,
That's the sort of setup we want.
And then I'm going to walk you through some of kind of the finishing processes that I like to use with Camera Raw, and just how we take the image and just kind of finish it, make it look like it's ready to go out to the world and be shared with everybody. But a lot in terms of digital relighting and working with the color today, and just making sure that they blend in, right? So there it is without them, there it is with them. We're going to clean it up. We're going to do what we didn't quite get to yesterday. And we're going to have a blast while we do it. And then if we have extra time, there's a couple of little things I'll show you as well, but we'll get to that if we get to it. We almost never have extra time.
That's the thing in the Adobe Live space. You find like time goes ridiculously fast, right?
Yeah,
when you're when you're in the real flow of it.
You enter into the warp. So,
by the way, just sorry before you flag, you open up the floodgates now to the roof puns, Nathaniel, in the chat. You know what? I'll let you jump into your work, fan. I'll sort of strategically drop them in as we go. But there's quite a few in the chat, so yeah, right. I'll save you to that.
Okay, all right, sounds good. All right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to finish cutting out our subjects before adjusting light and color, saturation, all that kind of stuff to help make them blend a little bit better than they do. The first thing I want to do, and it's just a matter of housekeeping more than anything, if you look over here in the layers panel, my layer mask for our subjects is a little, it's not as neat as I want it to be. So you can Alt or Option click your mask and bring up the alpha channel. I know over here, the white part, that's them. I want to keep that, but there's all this other stuff. In fact, if I Alt click the mask again, if I shut that layer off, we can watch over here by the rock, and we're going to see that there's some junk that shows up. So just to make sure none of that is happening, we'll take the rectangular marquee tool here. Let me just zoom out one click. Don't worry about that. Let me zoom out one click. Oh, it's sending me to Adobe Help. We don't want that either. Let me zoom out. That's what I meant to do. And I'm going to hold down Shift and just drag selections over that whole area. And black is our background color, so we can just hit Control Backspace. That would be Command Delete on the Mac, and then Control D and deselect, and then Alt or Option click that mask again. And we've just kind of cleaned that up a little bit. So now we're going to really dig in here on our couple and begin being very diligent and thoughtful about the edges and how we want them to be. So like, do we want this edge right here to have this softness? Probably not. So what I'll do is I'm going to grab my brush. We're going to paint with an opacity of probably about 70%. So I'll just hit the number 7, and we're going to paint along that edge and just see what happens. And you can see, wow, it's actually bringing back a little bit of highlight. I probably don't want that. I'm going to hit the letter X to flip my foreground color to black and just paint that away and just go over the edge, clean away anything that would resemble haloing, stuff like that. We're going to recreate edge lighting in just a moment. And you can see how it's a very jarring, because there's no edge light and none of that environmental light sort of doing that light wrapping trick that light does. It's a very jarring edge, just bang right to the background. And it's particularly going to be jarring in your composites, because very often in composites, you're going to see that there's not a lot of shallow depth of field. So you're going from a relatively sharp image to a relatively sharp backdrop. But I just like to come through here and just do manual cleanup. And the nice thing about pictures is, remember, we're not baking here, we're cooking. This is an art, not a science. So if it looks good to the eye, it's good. You don't need to worry about somebody zooming in and saying, oh, there's 1 pixel right there that's just a little too bright. No, go look at somebody else's photos.
I'm glad that you mentioned that with the percentage. Do you find that when you get to a point, even like say a 300%, you're like, what, do I need to go in anymore? Like,
yeah,
is it
right.
That midpoint of like how much do you go in to edit? So that
well, and that's where when you're using Photoshop, the hotkey Control-0 or Command-0 on the Mac, just show the whole image. That's going to be your friend, because when you zoom out and you look at it the way everybody else is going to see it, you're going to see, oh, okay, I can actually see a little bit of haloing, or no, that's absolutely good enough. It looks just fine. So that's where just being cognizant of how your artwork or your pictures or whatever you're working on are going to be viewed. It's really important. See, like here, we probably want to try to get rid of that little bit of haloing, or at least most of it there on the underside of her arm. That's a little piece of hair underneath there. We don't need to absolutely go overboard here. We got some of her dress missing. We want to make sure we bring that back. And we do want to focus here on the front side of the shoulder. I don't mind if there's a little bit of haloing that's there, because you're going to see, again, if we look back at our picture, the sun is over here, right? So our direction of light is going to be like this, right? So what we know is that we're going to have highlights here along the front of her dress, just like we have the highlights on these rocks, right? Because the sun is naturally coming across the horizon. He's also going to have highlights on his face, maybe the top side of the hand a little bit. His suit is not going to have that much highlighting because it's a very dark suit, and dark colors tend to absorb light instead of reflect it. It's the way they work. So we're not going to have to do a lot, but we will have to be kind of cognizant of casting maybe a slightly bluish shadow up off the ground onto the bottom of both his shoes and slacks, as well as the base of her dress. So just some things that we're thinking about here while we're doing this. Let me cancel that.
Just on that, I can see we've got a few a few comments actually relating to when we're discussing about the zooming in. We got a lot of comment from Oliver. He said, I have to keep reminding myself that no one else is ever going to look at my photos full res one by one. I mean, that's the whole like bane of being a designer, right? Where it's attention to detail, not a bane of it, but it's more, I mean, we're going to be our worst critics, right? So you're always going to want to make sure it's perfect. But obviously, whilst Nathaniel's doing that, if you got any questions that you can see in his process, or things you're a bit confused about, maybe what tools he's using, please do get that in the chat, and I'm sure he's happy to.
Yeah, and I tend to fly through what I'm doing, so definitely I can explain I can't explain anything. I can explain most things. So if you see something and you're wondering, why did I do it that way? Why didn't I do it some other way? Definitely drop that in the chat. I love hearing from you guys, and your questions make it feel like I'm valued, so I appreciate it.
Of course, buddy, you're in a safe space. I always say it's a conversation between myself and you, which it is, but there's also our friends, i.e. the audience and the world out there, which is great to see. So yeah, always get those comments in the chat, my friends.
All right, so bring around his face. We're looking for, hello. Don't want to bring that back. All right, so we just go over those edges and clean them up just a little bit. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. I want to focus now on her hair. And we talked a little bit about Photoshop's AI yesterday, and the things I like to use it for, the things I don't like to use it for. Images like this, stuff like select and mask, the quick selection tools, they generally don't work very well on them, because they, the more help you can give the artificial intelligence, the more it can help you. And what I mean by that is, if you have a perfectly sharp, wonderfully shot image over a solid color studio background, Photoshop's AI is going to be like, oh, give me 100 of these images, I'll bang them out in 5 minutes, no problem. But when you have something that's over a natural background, and remember, this is just them in front of this lake, when we have this, it just makes things a little tougher. That being said, with every iteration of Photoshop, they seem to be improving the engines, and let's see what we can get here. So I am just going to select the layer mask, and your properties panel will display a number of things, one of which is this select and mask option. So we'll select that. We'll jump into select and mask here. And you can see everything we've masked. It looks the way it should. Cool. I'm going to just use the refine edge brush right over here. So refine edge brush, something like a 20 pixel brush, looks like it'll work pretty well for us. Let's test it out here on her underarm, where we have this bit of hair, because if we can either bring back the natural hair, that's fine. If not, that's the kind of thing that you probably don't want to deliver an image to a bride where it's like a big piece of hair coming out of the armpit. Most of your brides are not really going to appreciate something like that. So we're going to just
their own though, but yeah, that's a good point.
we're gonna just cover that up just to clean it up. It's not telling a story. It's just there kind of in our way. So we're gonna just clear that out. And then what we'll do is we'll use that refine edge brush, and I'm gonna begin painting here. That little plus icon I'm gonna keep outside of her hair. So I'm gonna just allow the brush to kind of rub up against the side of her hair like so, and pretty good. Let's come through the middle here and see if you can knock out most of that in the middle. Great. Maybe right there by her shoulder. Cool. Just keep bringing this over the top and see. One of the things that you'll learn with a lot of brides, a lot of models, you're looking to add some volume to the hair too. So if in trimming the top of the hair, you're really just like flattening it out, that'll be something we'll go back and adjust later. But right now our primary concern is just getting like a good edge. She's got some kind of pearly something in the back of her hair. We probably want to make sure the majority of that remains. So something like that is pretty good. And I don't think I'm going to make any adjustments to it, because all the adjustments we'll make on our mask. We'll run this across the top of his head a little bit too, and just see if it gives us anything. Nope. I used the wrong tool. That was the quick mask tool, or the quick selection tool. There we go. Just refine that edge a little bit as well. Anywhere where there's a very rough, very intricate texture, it can be helpful here as well. The buttons on his suit, maybe that'll be a good place to do that. If I can select the tool, there we go. So we can paint over those. Just bring me back a little of that detail, like so, and that's great. And then I'm not going to mess around with any of the global refinements. So smooth, feather, contrast, shift, edge, they can all remain default 0. Output settings, it's going to say, look, it's just outputting to the same layer mask that we're already working in. You could create new layers. We don't need it. Frankly, we don't want it right now. So I'll hit OK, and it's going to do away with a lot of that in her hair. But it does leave behind some glowing. So we have some options at this point. We can either try to get rid of all the glowing, and we would do that. I'm going to duplicate this layer, Command or Control J, and just shut off the bottom layer, because I don't think this is the way we're going to keep it, but this is a good thing to just have in the back of your head. We grab the brush tool and set it to the blend mode soft light. Opacity 50 to 70% is great. So I'll leave it at 70%. And then we're going to paint with our foreground color set to black. There we go. And I'll make my brush a little bit bigger. Now, what's going to happen when we paint is it's just going to paint away that haloing without really painting the hair away. Nice. You can see I'm even painting over the hair. Now, what this is going to do, and where you need to be careful, is you tend to get this like rough, crunchy edge business, which is not ideal. But what's happening if I jump into the mask is when the brush is set to the soft light or overlay blend mode, soft light is just a little more subtle in the way it works. The brush is looking for pixels that are similar to the color that you're painting with. And in this case, we're painting with black, so it's saying, all right, that's already dark gray, but you can see it's not messing with the white. It's just kind of making that edge very hard. And this is why we tend to get that really pixely look if you overdo this. So we'll just undo this. Not to say this is bad, and we are going to do this a little bit, but getting rid of all the haloing that way, firstly, it kills a lot of that volume in the top of her hair that we just talked about. And secondly, we tend to get that crunchy edge, which is not what we want. So we will do a little bit of that. We're going to just do like one pass real quick, just clean up some of the haloing that's out of control. And even down here, like the back side of her arm, we don't need any of that haloing. There's not really going to be light coming from there. Maybe at the very bottom side, some of that sun would leak through. Same thing with his jacket. And the nice thing about like a jacket, this is a great technique for something like this, because if your jacket has a harder edge, that's expected. It doesn't have that organic, semi-opaque-ness that a head of hair would have. So this blurry edge on the jacket, we go over this a couple times. It's just going to crisp that right up and make it look like a nice clean edge very, very quickly and easily. So just something like this. You can see we can very, very quickly go over it and just clean up some of this stuff that needs to be cleaned up. There's a piece of his pant leg missing. So we'll just take care of that really quickly, go back to normal.
I've got a question for you, Nathaniel, whilst you're designing that. So maybe for those who maybe missed out on yesterday a bit, this project is a passion project? Is it for a client? What was the kind of...
It's nothing. It's just using some stock photos. Nice. So the whole point is just doing more realistic looking composites. So this might be for a local bridal company or anything like that. I mean, composites are such useful tools for telling stories, whether you're trying to sell your brand of cinnamon toothpaste, or raise money for the local teachers union, or promote your babysitting business, or whatever it may be. You can always tell these stories with composites. And we talked a little bit about the storytelling element, that look for the first element of your story, the second element of your story, and that third element of your story, and draw a triangle. Whether or not we'll have the time to do that today, because the original idea is also have a wedding photographer in this image. I don't know if we're going to have time to mesh him in, but... He's going to rock climb
in from the side, I can imagine. Just like
yeah, right, exactly.
Backpacking and...
just to jump out of the airplane like the Queen. We will... we're going to come a little bit closer here on... work on her hair a little bit. So the other options, other than getting rid of that bright halo-y edge... one of the options we have is to try to darken that edge. So that edge, it's still pixels that are there. Can we use that to our advantage and darken them? Well, I would say yes. We're going to do that by using the rectangular marquee tool and drawing a selection around her head like so, and hitting Command or Control J. It's going to pop a copy of this up onto a new layer. And you can see that this is a mess, right? It gets rid of our mask, so part of the background appears behind her again. But we're going to use the hotkey, and actually I'm going to call this darken hair edge. The hotkey we're going to use is Control-Alt-G, that's Command-Option-G on the Mac, and it's going to clip that to our layer below, which is going to allow us to, that mask is then going to come back into play because the visible pixels on the lower layer, well, it's just her head. So this edge I'm now going to set to the blend mode of multiply. And now what we're going to do is we're going to apply a layer mask to this layer. I want the layer mask to be filled with black, so we're going to go layer, layer mask, hide all. Yesterday, if you recall, you can also just hold down your Alt or Option key and hit the new mask icon. It will give you a filled mask. Just trying to show you multiple ways of doing this. We're going to grab our brush tool again. We'll set the opacity probably to like 20%, so hit the number 2. And we are going to begin painting over this edge. And what will happen, we're painting with our foreground color set to white. We're just going to begin revealing that dark underlayer. And what it's going to do is take the pixels that are already there, and instead of getting rid of them, it's going to just say, hey, take them and make them dark, right? And that's very important because not only is it getting rid of the halo, but it's allowing us to add this volume to her hair. So we go with all that lightness and then we darken it just like that. And if it's too much, it's its own layer. So you can always reduce the opacity of the layer and blend it just perfectly. So we can really get rid of that haloing edge, even on very organic, very difficult to mask matter, if I may so call hair matter, just like we did there. So you can see now we zoom out, it looks like a very, very clean, nice edge. Now we will end up going and creating our own highlight because, as I mentioned, we have this sun issue that we have to deal with. And speaking of the sun, we should probably create our sun for the scene because we need to begin thinking about how we're lighting our subject here, or our subjects, and then we got to clean up the ground on which they stand to create a shadow. But I want to get the sun in place. I want to talk about the sun and direction of light, how we build our shadow, all that kind of stuff. So let's create our own artificial sun here by creating a new layer, and we're going to call this layer sun. And I am going to grab my brush tool, which is right here. I'm going to make this a very hard-edged brush, maybe around 90%. We're going to make the size probably closer to 100, something like that. And I'm going to click once. If you recall correctly, actually, yesterday we created a set of guides that are going to show us where the sun goes in the sky. You can bring up your guides, nice. Control semicolon or Command semicolon, and sure enough, if we zoom in, you can see, yeah, that is where the sun was. The sun rays remain. So we know that. We're going to set the opacity of our brush tool to 100% by hitting the number 0. And I'm going to click and add a sun right there, just above the horizon. And that's our sun. Doesn't look very sunnish because it's black.
Eclipse kind of vibes, right? But yeah.
Right. So the way we're going to begin changing this is we're going to duplicate our sun layer twice. Now, I'm going to give you forewarning. Creating what we're about to create and using big blurs and big swaths of modified color, this is exactly when you most want to be using 16-bit imagery. And if we look at our image, we go image mode, we'll see that we are in fact using 8-bit imagery. So that is what we call less than ideal. And the reason is because 16 bits per channel have thousands upon thousands of levels of color and tone. Most images aren't 16-bit. Most of them are 12, 14-bit, depending on the camera you're shooting them with, but that's a moot point. They still have tens of thousands of levels of color and tone, whereas an 8-bit image has 256 levels of color and tone. So as we begin fussing with our sun layer, the propensity to have noise and banding appearing is going to be way more likely than if we're working with a 16-bit image. So just something to keep in mind here. It's not going to destroy us, but it is something to keep in mind, and something if you deal with banding on a regular basis, this is how you deal with it. All right, let's shut these off. Let's go with our bottom sun layer first here. And we're going to hit Command or Control T, and I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key, and we're going to make this big, like so. And then we're going to zoom out just a touch. I'm not going to zoom out. Actually, I'm going to hold down Alt and the Shift key. Whoops, I don't want to do that. Let's just commit this change. Let me zoom out. You can see it's naturally given us some blur. That's good. Command or Control T again. Hold down Alt and Shift this time, and we're going to stretch it out maybe like that. And now we're going to blur this additionally by going Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And we'll keep an eye on it, probably about 150 maybe. It all depends on the size of your image. Ooh, I might go 225. Yeah, that's probably.
I'm getting Nathaniel. Excuse me. I'm getting almost like godlike vibes here. You creating your own sun, buddy.
Yeah,
if only the world kind of worked in that kind of logic.
Life is not that easy. All right, so I'm going to stretch this out to the side. I'm holding Shift and Alt again. That'll be Shift and Option on the Mac. And we've got our first, this is like the residual rays of sun, the way the sun is going to be lighting our scene. And we're going to now color this by hitting Command or Control U. Command or Control U is going to apply Image Adjustments Hue Saturation. You can see Control U is our hotkey. It's going to apply it to this layer. It's very destructive. We don't care. This is really easy to redo. We're going to check on colorize. We're going to make it lighter. So we're going to increase the lightness, and we're going to pump that saturation up because we're looking to introduce color. And the sun is usually more red, pinky, orange. Remember the time of day at which this photo was taken was around sunset. So there's going to be naturally more of that magenta pink in the sky, but it still definitely heads toward the orange direction. So my bigger cast of sun glow will definitely be more orange. Our central glow will be more pink red. So we'll hit OK here. And then we're going to set this to the blend mode screen. So you can see there's before, there's after. And we can still control it here. We're going to mess with that a little bit in a second. Command or Control T to make this guy bigger. Hold down Alt or Option. Let's make it about that big. And then Option Shift, and we'll size it out like that. We're going to once again go Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. 350 is probably a little bit too much. Let's go 225, something like so. And then we kind of want the same settings. We just want the color to be different, like the hue to be different. Saturation and lightness are good. So we use the hotkey Control U to bring up hue saturation again. But in Photoshop, if you hold down the Alt or Option key, you can open up adjustments and filters and things like that with your last used settings. So if we go Control Alt U, it's going to bring up hue saturation with those settings already in place. So all we have to fuss with is hue. And we're going to say, look, yeah, make it just a little bit more salmony, that pink red color like so. And again, we'll go to the screen blend mode. So we're starting to blend things together. It's an extreme sun, but we like extreme suns.
It's looking good though, man. I think, I guess even for those in the chat, especially for those who may be very new to this space and understanding and for the first time sort of seeing it, you're probably thinking, how on earth did he do this so quickly? But I mean, this is the beauty of seeing the process, and any sort of question that you're unsure about, please do get it. Because even me watching this now, it feels like, I don't know, dude, this whole position you obviously explained it has been amazing, but that transition from no sun much to this sort of beautiful sunset, it's awesome and so quick. So again, any questions, get in the chat. And I can see in the chat we've already got a few jokes popping up here. We've got Black Hole Sun, isn't that a Muse band? And then we've got a very impressive General Kenobi, most impressive, he said. So folks are loving your process, dude.
Cool. That's good to hear. So what we're going to do now with the sun is we need the sun to be essentially white, but I'm going to add just a teensy tiny bit of orange to it. So again, we're going to go Control Alt U, Command Option U on the Mac. We're definitely going to go closer to the yellow, and we need to bring that lightness almost up to the point where it's white, like it's essentially disappearing in there. Don't worry about that. It's going to come back for us. We are going to do a couple things here. We're going to set this to the blend mode, linear dodge add. I'm going to blur this a tiny bit. So we're going to go blur, Gaussian blur, not 225, maybe 25, maybe not even 25. Yeah, that's too much. Maybe 8, something like that. Even that's too much. Let's go 3. We can go maybe 4.5. Yeah, so about 4.5. That looks pretty good. And the sun being so far away, it is hard-edged. If you ever take the time to look at it, don't. But it doesn't look hard-edged because we're seeing, when you look through heat, like this from a desert, you see that mirage, which has that kind of like living edge to it. And that's what we're about to apply. So we have a slightly blurred edge combined with the fact that this is set to linear dodge add. We're going to double-click on the layer, bring up our blending options, and we're going to uncheck transparency shapes layer. And it immediately turns it into what is a glowing ball of fire. And if I were to make this bigger, you're going to see that you see how that edge, look at how that
Mm.
edge is glowing, no matter how big or small I make it. So that's what that linear dodge add combined with layer shapes transparency is doing. It's giving us that edge that is glowing like the sun would be doing, and also just interacts with the background underneath the sun. So we put that there. And then to control that, we don't want to use opacity. We want to use the fill opacity because of the way layer shapes transparency works. So we'll just reduce the fill opacity a little bit and keep the intensity of the sun while dialing it back a little bit. And then we'll also, let me zoom out. We do want to tone back our saturation, or not saturation, opacity, excuse me, on our light. I want to make the sun a little bit smaller now that I'm looking at it. So let's just hold down Alt or Option, make the sun a bit smaller and move it down a little bit. We're going to take advantage of those rays that are left behind. Hey, why not? I'm going to reduce the fill opacity of it even a little bit more. And you can see how it's not just making it fade right away. It's changing the way those edges are interacting with the color around it. So it's really making a big difference and just allowing it to really look like, hey, we didn't have the sun. Now we have this sun. It's killed off a lot of contrast. We're going to take care of that in a little bit. But the main thing we're concerned with getting is that depth, that color, and that haze introduced to the environment. All right, so now that we have that, let's go over here and work on the floor on which they stand, and then we're going to work on the color and tone and saturation of them to make sure they blend in as well. So if you recall, we brought them in and we put them on this rock ledge that we already have, but they were also standing on a bit of a rocky ledge themselves. And part of the reason I like, and again, like we harped on yesterday, why it's extra good if you can go and shoot your own photos for your composite, because you can control stuff like this. You can have somebody stand on a rock and shoot them exactly at the angle you want to shoot them with, and with the light that you want them to be lit with. So all of that's really important stuff. We're of course using stock photos from Adobe Stock because this is an example, but all of this is important. So let's go ahead and just paint away the ground a little bit more around them. So I'm going to grab my brush tool. We're set to an opacity of 100%. I'm going to hold down Shift and use my square bracket keys to make my brush a little bit softer. We're going to paint with our foreground color set to black. I just hit the letter X to swap foreground and background color, and we're just going to rough paint around them. Now I do want to keep, there's all this grass that is overlapping her dress. We want to keep that grass. It's a very organic, natural looking edge that's going to be easy to preserve, and it also carries with it that little bit of shadow. So if we can keep that, that's great. Even if it's like a soft edge, that's cool. Nice. And we can just start painting away some of this stuff, and we can change the color, because right now the real reason that doesn't look like it belongs is because it's way too orange brown, and it should have a little bit more blue teal like the grass and moss here on the front side of our stone has. So that's just all part of what we're considering here. We'll come in here next to his shoe. And again, we want to keep what little shadow there is. We want to keep that tuft of grass that's covering up the nose of the shoe. And then we'll pop down through here and just paint along the back of the shoe like so. And you can really see when you do this, well, hopefully you can really see it. The reflection of light on the shoe is green. It should be blue. So these are the kind of things that we're going to be looking to change and kind of get on top of as we begin trying to blend them into this image. So all of that is contributing to make this look like it doesn't quite belong. Whoops, I don't want to do that. I just deleted the entire mask. Let's.
I've got a question for you, Nathaniel. Whilst you're, because I don't want to jump in your flow of it, because you're by all means, it's
interrupt me.
Obviously, obviously your knowledge of Photoshop and Photoshop, compositing is out of this world. I mean, the process. How did you kind of come about? Without going way off piece, did you study this, what you're doing, or did you self-taught? What was your kind of your?
So it's kind of a little bit of everything.
Okay.
When I first started, it was, I mean, there's a lot of, looking back on it, a lot of really bad composites. I still have a lot of really bad composites, frankly, because it is a difficult thing to do and to do well. And the thing about it is, if you mess up kind of one little bit, your whole composite can look like it doesn't belong. Somebody might look like they're standing there and they have no shadow and nothing connecting them to the ground, or the perspective isn't quite right, and just a lot of things like that. So it was a lot of trial and error. The guy who is in our artist spotlight, he years ago had a DVD that he sold, or a course or something. That's how long ago it was. I think it was a DVD. that where he talked about a lot of just the way that he was doing things back then, and just a lot of like little ideas you pick up. Because look, whether you're using, it doesn't matter whether you're using like a Canon or a Nikon, the tools can be different. The process of creating the art is the same, right? Van Gogh wasn't special because of the paintbrush he used. He was special because he was Van Gogh. So if you have a process that's great and that works well, that's where the magic lies. So, you know, having the best and the best and brightest tools is useful, of course. But you know, I can burn your food on a $10,000 stove just as much as on a $500 stove.
I love that. Right, you're not going to get an invite to my kitchen. No, but that's good. It's cool to know. And actually, what you said there, I think you hit the nail on the head, because I mean that could be applied to, you know, any, you know, creative craft within our industry, right? Not just necessarily in, you know, working with Photoshop. It could be editorial, it could be branding, and so forth. And I know of a lot of our audience, it ranges from, you know, students to graduates to people, you know, industry for years. But obviously, each of these streams that we do, you know, you guys can obviously learn quite a lot, hopefully. And actually, it'd be criminal of me not to mention again, we have a lot of tutorials, again, even when we're offline, that you guys can kind of watch and basically sharpen your skills. And what Nathaniel's working on now, again, we have tutorials and little tips for you guys to kind of get into. So if this is something that you're very, very new and thinking, I can't do this, within time, you definitely can, because you've got to start somewhere, right? So yeah, keep those that kind of inspiring, creating this kind of going, and then and
if you're just starting, you probably can't do it, but what you can do is a very simple composite. And you know, don't go for the stuff that feels impossible. Do something that's easy, that seems right. You can't eat an elephant in one bite, so just start taking little bites, and eventually you'll get there.
I mean, I don't ask if you've eeten an elephant before, but that's going to go off stream now. Completely off piece now. That's for another stream, but yeah, cool.
No, I never have. not necessarily interested either. All right, so we got rid of a lot of the ground there, and it just allows them to blend a little bit better. Of course, they don't have a shadow. They don't have some of the elements in the color that they should, but we're going to start taking care of that right now. So when you are blending images together, there's three primary elements outside of the perspective and size of your subject, right? So the perspective and size of the subject would be like if we were to take the two of them and say like, I want to flip them over here and I want to put them down here, right? Well, we would just say that looks ridiculous. I mean, what is she, twice as tall as a blade of grass? Like, it looks weird and funky and wacky. The light's all messed up. So the perspective isn't right, the size isn't right, the direction of light isn't right. Once you get those three things correct, you can, or you should then focus on, let me just drag this down to the trash. You should then focus on brightness and contrast of the subject as compared with your background, the saturation of your subject as compared with the background, and then the color tone. Is it very green? Is it very pink? Is it slightly off? All these different things. Now, as I think about this image, we did kind of cheat a little bit because he's wearing a black suit, she's wearing a white dress. So when it comes to saturation, there's not going to be a lot of adjustment in all likelihood. But we'll still go through the steps because more often than not, you're going to be using these things when you work on your own images. So I'm going to zoom out so we can see this image as a whole. What's happening here? Let me go. Just try to zoom out. Let me save my image.
I'm waiting for someone in the chat just to throw in there, oh, make the suit purple and the dress lilac. Just to kind of throw you off piece. Again, well, any questions you guys have.
If we have time, we can do that.
Nice.
All right. I'm going to zoom out here. Let's just view the entire image like so. I believe if you double click the hand tool, yeah, it also reveals the entire image. Just came to me there in that moment. So we have the whole image here, and we just want to bring the whole thing up and be able to look at it. So we're going to apply two adjustment layers. The first one is a black and white adjustment layer, and just leave it as default. And the second one is going to be, I'll shut off the black and white layer, a gradient map adjustment layer, also with the default black to white gradient, which will do the same thing. It'll convert your image to black and white, but differently. It does in a much more high contrast way, and it all depends on your image because it's mapping the black to the darkest and the white to the lightest areas of the image and everything in between. So it just depends on the range of contrast you have, how this is going to look. But the reason I like to use both of them is you just get a different look, right? So One of the ways we can check to see if brightness and contrast are working, or if our image is just sticking out, is convert the image to black and white like this. We remove the distraction of color and look at how much they stick out. They don't look like they blend in at all. So we know that there's some work to be done when it comes to both brightness and contrast. What am I thinking about when I'm thinking about contrast? I'm thinking about, for instance, look at how dark his suit is compared to the darkest shadows in our image, right? It's way darker. So we know we need to lift the black point at the very least of that suit, or it's never going to look like it belongs. So we got deep shadows under the trees and bushes over here at the base of this little rock here. We'll bring his suit more to that level of contrast. Then if we look at gradient map, we can see they still don't blend in. And as we expect, his suit is just incredibly dark because that solid black is just saying, take me to the darkest part of the image, bang, the suit. So we know that we need to make them brighter. So I'm going to bring up the original black and white because this is probably good enough for this image. We can see what's going on. Let's go ahead above our darken hair edge layer, but beneath the sun, and we're going to apply, you could really do this a bunch of different ways. I prefer using curves. It's the most sort of robust, but also most difficult way. I don't do it because it's most difficult. I do it because it's most robust, but it also happens to be most difficult. All right, we're going to clip this to the layer below, Control-Alt-G. That would be Command-Option-G. My control button seemed to be stuck there for a second. So there we go. It is now clipped. We can call this brightness, or let's say bright/contrast. I don't know why I did that all caps, but I did. And /contrast. There we go. All right. So now when we change our curves adjustment layer, you can see it's only going to affect them because we've clipped it to their layer, right? So what do we know? Well, we know down here in the bottom corner of our curves is the black point. So right off the bat, we know we need to lift the black point. So let's go ahead and lift that. And you can see his suit beginning to lighten up. So is she. So we want to be careful here. We don't want to completely kill all of the contrast that they have. But we definitely need to get rid of some of that contrast in the darker areas of the image. Let's bring back some of those darker tones. I'm going to lift the middle of the image. I do want her dress to be pretty bright, even if it's much brighter than the environment around her, because she's the focal point here, right? Like, she's the star of the show. We want to make sure that she is sticking out a little bit, but not too much. So that's good. I'll probably
for any soon-to-be brides in the chat. I think that that's a massive smile on her face to maybe sort of hear those comments. Yeah.
Well, I used to do some wedding photography, and if you don't know it before you do wedding photography,
dude,
you know it after.
I should have called. We actually got married literally a few months ago, so I would have actually called you if I had known. Flying you out from the US, and then there we go.
Well, congrats on that.
Get us in the chat. And again, any comments or anything you guys want to share, get us in the chat. We'd love to.
So at this point here, you can see according to the black and white, we've made them blend in quite a bit more. His suit is going to be dark, but it didn't need to be as dark as it was. Now, when I shut off the black and white adjustment layer, they just look too flat. Like, they look too hazy, too faded. So this is where, remember, it's an art, not a science. So this is where I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to make some adjustments just based on the way it looks to me here. So I'll brighten this up. I'm going to bring the white point down a little bit, and I'm going to add another point and just smooth that out, just kind of like that. So there's before, there's after. We're making them quite a bit brighter. And then because it's a not a contrast layer, I'm reading bright contrast. Because it's a curves layer, you can always adjust your opacity and just tone it up or down. And if we check in black and white and we look before and after, we've done a lot to bring some more life into them. I might reduce the opacity just a little bit more. Bring it down around 60. That might be more like what I'm looking for. Okay, so that'll be enough for that now. We can come back and tweak it and adjust it in a little bit. The second thing that I mentioned was we want to look at saturation. And we're going to do this by creating what's called a saturation mask. And we create a saturation mask by using a selective color adjustment layer. So right here, or if you go up to layer, where is it? New adjustment layer, selective color. It's going to create a selective color adjustment layer. Now, I have this saved as a preset in Photoshop, but I'm going to do it manually here so you all can see what I'm talking about. We're going to go to whites. Well, first of all, you don't want this set to relative. You want this set to absolute. And we're going to reduce black to 0. We're going to go to neutrals. We're going to reduce black to 0. We're going to go to blacks. We're going to reduce black to 0. Then we're going to go up to colors, and we're going to increase black to 100% for each one of our colors. So just like this, we can do that. And by the way, I believe you can do it the other way as well, where you can make the colors go 100% black, and then you can take all the tonal values and make them, negative 100% black. So there we have a saturation mask on our image. Well, actually, I think this is a negative saturation mask. But what we're looking at here is the lighter an area of the image, the less saturation there is in that part of the image. The darker an area, the more saturation there is. So when we look at our couple, of course, the suit is basically devoid of color. It's a very dark suit. And her dress also quite devoid of color because it's white. This is why I said we, thinking about it, we kind of cheated when we picked a bride and groom as our subject here and not, a court jester or something. But what we do have to look at is her skin tone. So if we grab our zoom tool and we zoom in, we can see that their skin tone is relatively dark. So we might want to just cool back the saturation on the skin tone a little bit. So let's go down to our bright contrast layer, and you could use vibrance saturation. That's what most people jump to. I tend not to like doing that. I like to have channel-based control over my saturation. So I'll use hue saturation. We're going to clip it to the layer below. You can use this little icon as well as that hotkey Control-Alt-G. Let's clip it to our stack below. This is going to be saturation, which I misspelled, but you know what? It's not a mistake. It's a happy accident. So what we'll do is you can use the little finger tool, and we can just click on her chest or her neck area and pull back on the saturation. You can see as we pull back on the saturation, it becomes white because we're getting rid of all the saturation. If we increase the saturation, look at how dark it gets. So we just want to, I'm really looking at like the mids of the trees behind her. So I'm thinking if we desaturate them -20, something like that. We're working in the red channel, by the way. And we automatically selected the red channel because we use this finger tool. What's the predominant color in most human skin tone? Red. So your reds and yellows are really where we're going to be targeted. If we shut off the saturation mask, we can see there was before and there's after. So it's a subtle difference, but it's going to be a difference that helps us later on as we continue working through this image. So we've got our brightness contrast.
Just to pause it just today, as it's a nice time to maybe pause and just to let anyone who's just maybe come in quite new, because I can see a few people have come in the chat and I would hate them to think, what is going on in this section? So today we have the amazing video creator and photographer Nathaniel Dodson, and you joined us. We're in Photoshop, basically working with some lighting matching to create a really realistic Photoshop image. So welcome if you have just joined us. Again, any comments if you're on YouTube, perhaps, get in the chat. If you're unsure what's happening, again, get in the chat. So yeah, by all means, please get those comments in. Nathaniel, take the floor. I don't know when it's interrupting your flow there, but I can see the chat was pinging off, and we had some people from Brazil coming in and all different parts of the world. So welcome, my friends.
That is A-okay. All right, so then the next thing is we're concerned with the colors. We just did saturation, more the hue. So if you think about in hue saturation, for instance, what do we have? We have hue, saturation, lightness. We did our lightness contrast first. We did our saturation next. Now we're concerned with hue. Is the hue of our inserted subject going to be close enough to the background that it's going to match? So how do we deal with this? Well, we create a solid color layer for this. So let's go layer, new fill layer, a solid color fill layer. Just going to be a temporary layer up on top. We set the brightness to 50%. That is 50% gray. We're going to say OK, and we're going to set this blend mode to luminosity. Now, when we zoom in here on our subject, we can see that our image is dominated by these cyans and greens. The foreground has this orangey yellow color. And where does that orangey yellow color coming from? Well, of course, it's coming from our sun streaking across this bumpy meadow and into them. They are not soaking up any of that orange color. This is a problem. We're going to fix that later. But their skin is quite pink. So let's work on that a little bit and just kind of bring it more like we think it should be. And even in her dress and the ground, it's maybe a little too blue for where things are. Now, normally I would use a curves adjustment layer, but to keep things mixed up and interesting here, we'll just go with the color balance layer. It's a little bit more intuitive maybe. We're going to hit this little button to clip it to our layer stack as well. And we're just going to call this color. And we'll begin with our midtones, and the opposite of red is cyan, as we can see. So let's just try reducing the red in this image. If we reduce it a lot, you can see, well, that really makes them quite cyan blue. We don't necessarily want that. We'll put a little bit of green in there. We can try yellow, just a very tiny bit of yellow. Let's go to the highlights here. We're going to do the same thing. I'm actually going to push a little bit of red into the highlights because that's going to work with her dress and his jacket. Well, his jacket, actually, that's going to be more of the shadows if I'm thinking correctly here. Let's go a couple little bits of yellow, and you can see it's very subtle, right? +5 on the red, -3 on the blue. Very subtle, but it's going to make quite the difference here. So we're going to pull some cyan. We're going to pull some cyan out of the shadows, therefore putting red into the shadows. And then I don't know that I'm going to do much with the yellow slider here. And then I want to add just a little bit of magenta to the shadows, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 clicks, something like that. Their skin is still pretty red, also orange. Let's go back to mid-tone. Let's try to add a little bit of blue. Don't want to go blue to the mid-tone. I really don't want to go blue to the mid-tones. Pull a little bit more blue out of their skin. All right, let's shut off our color layer. By the way, you can accentuate what your 50% gray layer sees by adding a vibrance adjustment layer and just cranking the saturation way up. So now you can really see, all right, their color tone is very orange compared to the rest of the image. Now, two things we have to remember: skin tone is always going to have more red and orange in it, especially when you're looking at a very green scene. And also, they're going to be lit by that very, very warm light. And if you want to see a difference between being lit by warm light, go outside of your house this evening when the sun is low in the sky, stand looking at the sun, take a picture of yourself with your phone, and then like turn so the sun is hitting your back and take another picture and look at the difference in color in your own skin. So it's a very, very warm light that's going to add a lot of orange to your skin. So we can see there's before we made the color change, there's after. So again, it's very subtle in this case, and it's all going to depend on your composite. Some of these changes are going to be big changes, but some of them are just little subtle changes like this, but they make a difference. It all lends toward creating this effect that they do belong. All right, let's come down here and color this rock they're standing on, make it a little bit more orange, and then we're going to talk about how to create their shadow. So let's zoom in here. This is going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to, above the sun, we're going to create a solid color layer, so solid color. And we don't need to be picky with the color. It can be any color you want here at this point. We'll select the layer mask, hit Control-I, that would be Command-I on the Mac. It just flips that black to white, so we hide everything in our layer. And the color that I really want is, I want to steal the orangey brown from this grass. That's why I wasn't being too picky with the color there. So hit the letter I to grab your eyedropper tool and just choose some bit of that brownish color, and then hit Option Backspace or Alt Delete. When you have the solid color fill layer selected, it just fills that colored layer with whatever color you've sampled. So that's what we did there. And then we're going to set this to the blend mode color. And if I disable the mask by shift clicking it, you can see that what the color blend mode is doing. It's just taking all the color and the saturation values that are there and replacing it with the color and saturation of, or I should say hue and saturation of the color I chose. You could also use hue. Sometimes that works a little bit better depending on the image you're using. I'm going with color. I want a little bit of the saturation. We can always tone this back via the opacity slider if we decide we want to. Shift click the mask to activate it again. And let's begin painting here around their feet a little bit. I may actually paint over the entire rock. So I'm going to come over here and just select that layer mask with my brush tool set to 20%. So I set the number 2, it gives us 20%. Use your square bracket keys to make the brush bigger or smaller. Those are the brackets just there to the right of the letter P on your keyboard. I'm going to hit the letter X to flip my foreground and background color, making white the foreground color. And I'm going to begin painting over this rock just like so. Let's come through here. I don't mind if I paint right over his show.
I can. There's the comments are absolutely awesome. We've got Robert who just said many great tips. Steve's agreeing as well. Again, any sort of things you guys are unsure about, please get in the chat. But Nathaniel, I'm quite curious. I mean, you mentioned a few times the caption, "It's not art, it's a science," which I love that kind of
well, it's not science, sort of it's an art.
That's basically what I mean. Other way around. That's clearly how much I'm switched on. I mean, again, for anyone who's quite new to maybe this space, again, it could be someone quite. Have you got any sort of tips or anything that you wish that you could kind of tell like a younger self? Maybe getting into the industry for those curious.
Yeah, I mean, it's not magic. There's people that make it look like magic. There's people who are really good at this stuff, and I'm not me. Like, people are way better at this stuff than me. And you see their work and you see what they do, and you're just like, how? And the answer is, you just got to do the work. If you practice, like somebody who plays a musical instrument is probably the best way I can describe it. If you pick up the
Mm,
guitar and you've never played the guitar, it feels impossible. Like this
mm,
is not something that humans were meant to do. And sometimes when you're doing complex images like this, or even more complex, you get that feeling where it's like,
mm.
this isn't like this is impossible. How do you even do this? You need a huge budget, or there's some magic trick, right? Don't fall into the trap of like, I have to always work smarter. Now, work harder. You'll figure out the smarter as you go, but the harder never goes anywhere, right? It doesn't
Nice,
get easier. You just get faster. Like that's all that happens.
nice.
So you just there's no shortcut. There's no quick easy thing that's like a magical. Oh, if only I have this special tool. I was saying yesterday on stream that one of the best commercial photographers that I know of in America
Mm,
is a guy down in Nashville, Tennessee. And for the first, I don't know, 10 years of his career, he didn't even own a small Wacom tablet or tablet of any kind.
wow. Okay.
So he was doing everything with a mouse, and he was doing like high level celebrity portraiture stuff. And it was really
Tiny
good
mouse.
stuff.
Yeah. Amazing.
And so there's no magic about it. It's just get in
Mm,
there, have fun with it, do what you think looks good, and just keep practicing, right? Keep an open mind to
mm.
hey, can I change this? Can I look at that? Look at good artwork. It helps inform your aesthetic intelligence and stuff
But
like
even
that.
when you mentioned obviously having fun as well, I think that is, I can see again, got Fernando who said absolutely great tip, loving it. I think having fun, that also people need to forget that is, I mean, you need to make a living, of course, but firm believer and you have fun whilst doing it, work becomes a little bit easy in that regard because it's a bit
Yeah, and
effortless.
and you
Yeah.
become more successful. It's easy to say once you have tasted a little bit of success, of course, but the real happiness is in the striving, right? The
Mm,
happiness doesn't come from producing great work. The happiness comes from striving to create great work, and in that striving to create great work, you will create great work, which is then just a
mm,
bonus. But then you're not married to the idea of, oh, I put it on Instagram and I only got 7 likes, or my YouTube video only got 27 views, or like whatever metric that you are self-conscious about or worried about or anxious about, whatever it may be.
mm.
None of all of it never becomes totally irrelevant, but it becomes much less relevant, and you become a much more stable creative person when you focus on, I'm going to do 2 hours of work on composites today, and I'm going to close
Nice.
out the outside world. All right, let's talk about light and how we figure out our shadows here. So, like I mentioned earlier, we have something going on here. Let me change my foreground color to something we can see. Let's go with let's go with a bright green. So we have our sun. Our sun is right here, and it's shooting beams of light across our image like so. All right. Oh, hello. Let me just come into here. Hit the enter key to deselect your shape that was just created. So we have our sun shooting beams of light across our image like this, right? And we generally want the highlights and shadows to reflect what the sun is doing. Now, you don't always have to be 100% perfect. Again, it's an art. It's organic. The more perfect you get it, the better it's going to look. But if you don't quite get it perfect, most of the time people aren't going to look at it and say, oh, it looks horrible. But if you're generally right, your image will look generally correct. So how do we figure out like the shadow for these guys? Well, here's kind of an interesting little experiment. When you consider the way that light works and the way that shadows work, we'll take here this yellow ellipse. This is our light. And then this ball floating in midair here is just that. It's a ball floating in midair. And maybe it's off to this direction from our light. Let's bring our light over here. Let's place our ball right here. Well, when we have our light is blasting through like this. But of course, light can't go through a solid object, so there's a shadow that's going to be somewhere down here on the floor. I'm going to bring up and place that guide right there. That guide is going to be our floor. So let's go ahead and talk about how this shadow is created. So you draw a line from the edge of your light source across the edge of the object that's creating the shadow and to your floor plane, right? So there, and then the other side of the light, right? Voila, there. So now if I come down here, I'm going to just delete these 2 layers. I'm going to create a new layer. If I create a shadow right down here, between these two shapes on my quote unquote floor. And then I fill this with, let's just set black as our other color here for a moment. Really, it should be a super dark purpley color, but let's just fill that. I'm going to hide the floor plane. I'm going to hide my two lines. We have what would be the shadow on the floor for our floating ball. But we all know that's not how shadows work, because shadows, it's not just the shadow, there's also a tapering depending on how near or far the object is to the light source. The closer an object gets to the light source, the softer the light becomes. And I know that seems counterintuitive, but if you're a photographer, hopefully you understand this concept. And you're going to see part of why this happens is because the closer an object gets to the light source, the greater the fall off of shadow is. So check this out. We're going to turn our lines back on. So how do we know how much shadow there should be, or how much fall off of shadow there should be? Well, easy. It's not that easy, but it's kind of easy once you understand. You draw a line from the side of your light source to the opposite side of your object. Let me turn the floor back on as well. And what we're going to get is, this is how big our shadow should be. So if I take my shadow and I duplicate it and I hit Command or Control T and I just stretch it out like this, and I set the opacity to like 20% and my middle shadow to like 50, if I hide my lines, that's how our shadow roughly would fall when it is in that position relative to our light. And what we would see is, if we bring our ball closer to the light source, well, of course, what's going to happen? What's going to happen is, and I'm going to do this quickly here, what's going to happen is all of a sudden we have the sides of our light, right? Like there's our shadow, cool. But then look at how wide, look at how much light fall off there is. I mean, there's an immense blur. I mean, it goes right off the document, right? So you have a huge blurring effect. Now, what we're dealing with our couple is the sun is not close to them. The sun's very far away from them. So we know that it's going to be a pretty hard-edged shadow, right? That's what this is telling us. And if we draw some lines from the sun to them, we can gain a rough approximation of really where our shadow should be and exactly how it should be falling off. But this is the way you're going to kind of play with those ideas. So I'll just close that document. Let's get rid of these lines and let's draw some quick lines here. So let's come over to here. And remember, it doesn't have to be exact. We're going to go from the bottom of the sun across the foot of her dress. In fact, I'm going to go to the very outside edge of her dress, which is right down here. I'm going to draw another line from this side of the sun to that second part of her dress, right? This part here. Whoops, I don't want to do that. You redo that. There we go. So both parts of her dress. So we know that one part of her shadow should be in there. One part should be on the outside. And then we're going to take the other side of the sun. We're going to go to the back of his shoe, right? Because that's kind of where the shadow will begin on that side. And we'll draw a second line from that side, maybe to the back side of her dress, somewhere right like that. So these lines now represent exactly where we know our shadow should be going. And we know that, I mean, if I were to draw lines from the opposite sides, they're just going to go off to so far off my document that I have to create a document 10 times bigger than this to even see where the shadow ends. Because it's just going to be a very, very hard-edged shadow. So we almost don't even need to worry about the shadow. We'll blend it using a mask. So with these lines in place, what we're going to do here is underneath the sun layer, we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to call this male shadow, and we're going to go female shadow as well. We're just going to split their shadows up like so. So let me go male shadow, and here's how we're going to do this. We're going to take the lasso tool. We're going to take the polygonal lasso tool, in fact, and I'm going to begin drawing from right around here, the back of his shoe. I'm going to follow the contour of that line, just like that. I'm going to come over to here, what would be the front of this shoe, great, and I'm going to hitch up to where this black line is, link over with the top of the front of his back shoe, bang, just like that. So that'll be a shadow that looks right for him. So let's fill that with black. That'll be Option Delete because black is our foreground color, Command or Control D to deselect. Looks awful because we haven't blended it, but that's the shadow. All right, let's back this up. Let's come over here to her dress. We're going to do the same thing. So with the lasso tool, we're going to follow the edge of her dress and use that. I actually didn't quite get the edge of the dress, so I'm going to go edge of the dress, and I'm going to follow that line just like that. I'm going to pop down here to the line here, and we're going to follow this, and we're going to take it right off the document. because again, the shadow is big. When you're using the polygonal lasso tool and you hold down with the space bar to move around the screen, sometimes the lasso tool drops a point. You can just hit the backspace key and just get rid of that, just so you don't have to deal with it. And then we're going to come over to here, and we're going to bring this right along here and even along the back side of the dress. And it doesn't really matter how the shadow looks here, because we're going to mask away everything that is sort of, behind her dress, if you will, because we don't want to see that. All right, so we're on the female shadow layer. We're going to fill this with black. Option delete. That'd be Alt backspace on the PC. Command or Control D to deselect. We can get rid of these lines. So I'm going to shift select those 4 line layers, get rid of them. All right, so now we have these layers. At this point, it all depends on the brightness and color and texture of the materials underneath the shadow. You sometimes can get away with like a multiply blend mode, an overlay, or a soft light. I think in our case here, we're just going to straight up reduce the opacity. So probably pretty subtle again, and I'm just being informed by, like, look at the brightness of the shadow on the backside of this rock. It's not that bright. Why isn't it that bright? Well, because in the evening time, we don't have very directional light. We have very omnidirectional light because the way the light is piercing the atmosphere, it's coming in at a super, it's really cutting through a lot of atmospheric haze. It's why your sunsets, you got so much more color in the sky at night. And when the sun is way up above you and just coming straight through, you're not getting all that extra color from, I guess, minerals and stuff in the sky. I don't know. Ask Neil deGrasse Tyson. He could probably explain it better than me. That's kind of what's going on, but it lends itself to a much more omnidirectional light. You do have direction, but the shadows are not nearly as harsh as, like, go to Miami at 1 o'clock in the afternoon any time of the year. You're going to have shadows that are sharp enough to cut the produce. All right, we got female shadow. We're going to reduce her down to 35% as well, something like so. And then we're just going to blend these. So I'm going to shut her shadow off. I'm going to select the male shadow layer. I'm going to grab my mask, and we're going to begin painting away the bits we don't want. So I'm going to set my brush to the opacity of 80%. I'm going to hit the letter X. Black is my foreground color. So I'm going to paint away the shadow that falls on top of the shoe. And there can be a little bit of shadow on the side of the shoe. That's fine. It is the dark side of the shoe. So that's fine. You just want to make sure you don't have like that hard line there that I just painted away. And speaking of hard line, we can just gently paint the shadow on the ground so it doesn't look like a hard pixelated edge, something like that. And if we zoom out here, it really doesn't look like we've done all that much until we take it away. So when you take it away and bring it back, all of a sudden you realize, okay, yeah, we did do quite a bit there. In fact, we did too much. I think that shadow should probably be down around 20, maybe 25% opacity, something like so. All right, let's turn on female shadow. Let's go ahead and add a layer mask for her. And let's zoom in here. Use our brush again. We're going to paint with our foreground color set to black. And what I'm doing here with her, we do want to keep a little bit of that shadow, like the dress is going to be absorbing a little bit of light that is bouncing off the ground up onto the bottom of the dress. And the best way, not the best way, but the easiest way right here for us to show this is just to use a big soft edge brush and allow some of that shadow, right? You can see how we're allowing some of that shadow just to kick up on the bottom of the dress there. So that's just a nice, convenient way to do that. I'm going to paint away the hard edges of my shadow there. I do want to make sure I bring some of that shadow back. There we go. We're going to make sure we're still painting with the color black. Come up over here over the dress. We're going to paint this away. Now here, this is interesting. This fold in the dress, we can probably allow some of the shadow there to remain. So I'm just going to knock the opacity of my brush down a little bit and something like that. If we shut that off, you can see there's before, there's after. So we're just respecting the fact that the sun is coming in on that angle, all right? And then over here on the ground, we're going to just make sure we soften this edge. Bing, bing.
I can see our folks in the chat we've all been educated, including myself. We've all finally been educated on the. You mentioned it's not a science, it's an art, but there's a bit of science in it. I can see.
Well, there is a little bit of science when it comes to the way the sun, when it comes to the direction of the sun and using those guides. But the reason I keep saying it's an art is because, like what I just did there, when we mask in the shadow, you don't have to be hyper precise. Right? You just got to kind of get in there and mix it up a little bit. Throw the mud against the wall. Some of it's going to stick and some of it's going to look great. I'm going to delete these 2 layers up here. All right. So now that we've gotten to this point, let me think about what we should do next. We should probably work on the highlight here on the front side of her as well as him, because when the sun comes blasting across the landscape, it's going to throw a lot of orange light, wabam, right onto her front shoulder, and also kick some into his face. and we need that to be reflected here in our image. So how do we create this edge lighting? The way that I'm going to create it is twofold. I'm going to begin by creating another solid color fill layer. So hit the little half white, half black circle, solid color fill layer. I'm just going to go with a sun-ish color, right? So it's very warm light. Let's go with maybe that, right? Something like that. Very light beige, I guess, would be the best way to describe it. And we're going to set this layer to the blend mode of, what do we want to do here? Color dodge, linear dodge. Maybe we'll do linear dodge add. We'll try doing that whole layer shapes transparency trick. We'll reduce the fill opacity a little bit. Kind of something probably like that. And then we're going to duplicate this layer, Command or Control J, and we're going to set this layer to the blend mode of, do we want to try screen? Do I want to try over? Probably overlay, and I'll bring the fill opacity back up. All right, let's fill both these masks with black by selecting the mask, hit Command or Control I, and that is going to just invert the color, white, and the opposite of white, of course, black. I keep hitting Control O. I mentioned yesterday I'm used to working on my Mac keyboard. I'm working on the PC today because it's the streaming setup. So my keyboard, I'm fumbling this keyboard like I've never used a keyboard in my life. I feel like, the video of the baby giraffe coming out, it's like stumbling all over.
I was going to ask actually, just on that, what is your setup? I mean, without getting, obviously we don't want to throw your piece, but your kind of setup. I mean, are you a Wacom? Are you a tablet? Are you a PC?
Yeah, so right now I'm using, I like the small Wacom tablets. I've used all the way up to the Cintiq, and there's just something about the small. I like the portability of it. I can throw it into a bag and take it anywhere. But it's just like little tiny fine strokes, and I'm always zooming way in on my images. So I would imagine if I was a big illustrator and doing a lot of artwork where I wanted big swooping lines everywhere, I would probably want the larger size tablet. But I love the small tablet, and it is my preferred. It always feels a little like I'm slightly self-conscious about it because it's it's the cheap one. And there's always that feeling of like, oh, I need the most expensive gear. But man, the most expensive gear, you finally get to a point where it's just like, I want what works best for me. All right, so what we're gonna do here is we're gonna paint a pretty harsh highlight along the edge of her hair. So we're just gonna come in here and do this. Right, ding, 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 jiggle along the side of that.
Nathaniel, my friend, just to flag, because I want to make sure we get a good time. We've got about 20 minutes or so before we jump into our artist spotlight. So
it's perfect.
Got good enough time, but again, for our lovely audience, if you're quite curious what that is, we're going to go in about 20 minutes or so. We won't say who because we'll keep it a surprise, but it's a bit of the segment where we share a bit of love to an artist or creative in the community about their design work. So stay tuned. 20 minutes or so, we will flag it and we'll show you who that is.
And it's a good one.
It's a good one, but no names, Nathaniel. Keep it a secret. We want our lovely audience to stay focused and keep it a surprise. So it makes it more fun.
So we're coming right along here, and you can see we're just creating this edge that's being just. You ever seen that picture of somebody? If I can show you here, this is what we're trying to do. I had a picture, right here. So here's an Adobe Stock image, and you can see when the sun is behind, look, it just like cracks that edge, right? Look at this, the edge of his hair, right? No detail. We don't care about the detail. We want that spike, cutting, biting edge light. That's just that pure, unadulterated sun, bam, right out of the sky, running into the side of your head and just giving like that angelic glow. It's such a cool effect, and it's kind of what we're trying to replicate here.
That was a beautiful way you then described that, then, Nathaniel. I've never seen anyone describe the sun hitting a person in that beautiful way. I appreciate it.
We're gonna bring the light down here. Now, we do have to consider that this is probably kind of behind this rock a little bit, but I think we're still going to take it kind of down to the ground. Whoops. Zoom in a little bit more. And voila, something like so. And we can fade the edges of this in a moment. But you can see we've created that along her edge. Still needs to be blended. I know, it doesn't look that great. We're going to have the sun probably hitting the back side of her hand here, as well as the front side of his thumb. You're just trying to think about, all right, what here would be hit by this light that is coming through. Maybe a little bit there on the front of his jacket. And then, so with men, you typically, you're going to put a little bit of highlight on the lower lip. If you put that highlight on the upper lip as well, it just tends to be like a weird glowing mustache look. I don't know. It never looks right to me, even if it is maybe technically correct. And then we're going to go here.
And he's clean shaven, so it's kind of
right,
weird.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right, cool. So we've got all that. We have not blended it. Don't worry. We're going to go to our second color layer here. This is the overlay layer. And we're going to kind of go over this again, but with a slightly bigger brush. So we're just looking to add that glow. Now remember, this is a blend mode of overlay as opposed to that, what was it, color dodge add that we had before? Linear dodge add, I'm sorry. Working here in our layer mask, we're just going to add this glow and just give us that nice edge. And we can blend this off in just a moment, just like this. And if it's too much, we can always knock it down a little bit. But when you're in there mixing it up, it usually always looks like it's a little bit too much. And then when you back off and look at it, it's kind of like, oh, okay, that looks pretty much right. That being said, it's gonna definitely look like it needs to be changed probably when I zoom out. But let's see. Yeah, I mean, you can just see how strong that edge light is. But no problem. Let's finish adding it here. Bing, 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 bing. Bing. So this is where if you zoom in, you just get these little short, nice clean glow right there on the jacket. Very cool. Chin, bottom lip, nose, brow, forehead, a little bit of the hair, something like so. Cool. All right, that's fantastic. I don't think we need anything on the pant. We could even go in and do it on the layers of the dress, depending on how much we're assuming the sun would be coming through, like right through here, this window, and hitting the dress, right? So it could be like on those parts of the dress. We're not going to do that right now, though. All right, so what we want to do is begin blending this, and we're going to do that first and foremost by wiping the edges a little bit, and we're going to wipe the edges by using our brush tool. We're going to make the brush a little bit bigger, if I can click it here. We're going to increase the size. 40, 50, it looks like it's about good, and we want no hardness. And we're going to set the opacity to about 50%, and we're going to flip our foreground and background color. We want our foreground color to be black. I'm going to make the brush a little bit bigger, actually. And we're just going to click a couple times just to dab a little fade into there, all right? So something like that, anywhere that looks like it needs it, something like so. That's cool. Whoops, I just deleted the layer, 2 layers, actually. Let me undo. There's something like that. A little quick on the delete button there for me. There we go. And down here near the ground as well. And then I'm going to do the same thing here with the bigger glowing bits of this. Let's just blend them. Just take that hard edge, right? You can see that hard edge. We just want it to blend into what would be the bottom part of the image. Okay, cool. And then here up in the hair, we'll do the same thing, where we just blend that edge. Great. Same thing here on the hand. Good. And then just dab around the highlight on the jacket, and then around on his head a little bit, edge of the head. Cool. All right, now they still look like they're glowing, like they're electronic people. I do want to zoom in on the earring here, because that does need a little bit more of the glow. So I'm going to paint with white here. Just going to add some of this glowing to the earring. Cool. All right, so now in order to really help this blend better, when you select your mask, up in the properties panel, you have a feather slider. So hey, here we do want to zoom in because we want to keep an eye on this. Now we're working on the top color fill layer. This, if I shut it off, you're going to see it's that bigger area of orange. So as we look at what the feathering is doing, we're just keeping an eye on that bigger area of orange. That's probably pretty good. And then the linear dodge layer, select the mask, and we want to feather this as well, but just very slightly, because we do want to keep that intensity of the edge, that like the glow. You can see how it looks like the glow is like springing off of her, right? So now you can see it really looks like, wow, she's catching a ton of that sunlight coming across the meadow. And him, it looks like, yikes, he's got way too much of that hitting him. Well, this is where we can make these adjustments. So I'm going to select, it's that overlay. He's got too much on him. So I'm going to make a big brush using my square bracket keys. Opacity, set it to like 20%. Hit the number 2, hit the letter X. We want to flip our foreground color and background color. I want to be painting with the color black. We want to make some of this go away. And I'm just going to tone it down. I'm going to tone it down as well with the linear dodge highlight. Right? So just like that, up on the top of his head, really looks like it needs to be toned down. Same thing back here. The fingers look like he's sitting over a campfire or something. And also up on the top of the hand, it needs to be toned down a little bit for both of them. Something like so.
One, man. We've got just a flag. We've got 2 comments in the chat, which whenever you're in a good safe spot, I can sort of flag it and throw it in the mix. Are you good to mention now? We've got Marsha. You said, do you ever use the smudge tool as a?
Not really. The smudge. So and the reason I don't is twofold. Firstly, it's very destructive editing. With the mask, I can go in and I can always like add, remove, add, remove, add, remove, and the underlying layer is just sitting there, just chilling. The other thing about the smudge tool is, and I'm in a position, thankfully, where I don't need to worry about this as much. It's a very RAM intensive tool. Like there are times when your whole computer seems like it is groaning under the weight of holding up the smudge tool. So at a much younger age, I just kind of stopped using the smudge tool altogether. There are a couple things here and there I use it for, but I very, very rarely use it at all these days. I'm going to duplicate this overlay layer, Command or Control J, and you can see that's really making the glow go wild. We're going to select the layer mask and fill it with black, so Option, Delete. You can hit me with that other question.
Sure. So we've got one. By the way, thanks, Marsha, for that. Always great to any sort of questions.
Yeah, great question. Yeah.
So Robert, we said, would it not be? Start again. Would it not be a shadow between the stone and the bride?
Yeah, there would be, and we're gonna get to that in a second. We're gonna get to that because there really should be more shadowing behind them as well, like on the back side of her dress. Because originally in her photo, the light is coming in kind of behind her, so it's over on this side of her face. And the way that we composited the backgrounds together, we do have to add shadowing to the back side of the stone. We're gonna get to that though. But
don't worry, Robert. We've got you, buddy. But yeah, like Nathaniel said, good shout. Cool. Yeah, go for it.
So I'm just adding what I did. I duplicated the layer. It's an overlay. It's that same orangey color. And I'm just looking to just spread that orange color out away from the edge onto them. It's making them more orange, but just giving us that orange light from the sun. And sometimes, we always think about, I've got to make my subject match the background. We can take it the other way and make the background match the subject a little bit as well by coming over here to like the overlay, the really intense overlay layer, select that layer mask and give some of that same color. Oh, it's my fault there, I double clicked. And we can add some of that to like these stones here. Right, so we can say like, hey, look, let's give some of that orange light to the front side of these stones. Maybe over here to these little subtle highlights on the ground. Some of these areas here, right here on the ground, just kick that up a notch. These highlights on the rocks here, all very subtle stuff, but just helps pull the image together a little bit more as you're kind of playing with it. As well, you can come in here and even hit the trees, the tree lines along the little bits of mountain, that we have. If I make my brush a little bit smaller, we can really get in there and do that. And you don't even necessarily have to be super duper precise about this particular element of working with hills, because any overspray is just going to look like lowland fog, like that kind of, I mentioned it yesterday, you've seen those pictures of the Great Smoky Mountains. There's always those layers of like mist and fog arising from the ground. And that's all that's going to happen. If I come back here and I start adding in some of this light, it's the only thing that's going to do is just make it look like there's a little bit more atmosphere there. I know we toned these highlights down yesterday, but we're just thinking in terms of, we do have that sun coming across the image. So we're going to just add that highlight. Actually, I need to add a highlight to the back of the rock.
Getting Lord of the Rings vibes in terms of the scenery. Not to say that they're from the cast, but yeah, there we go. It's each to their own. But yeah.
Yeah. So if I shut those layers off, you can see this is before and this is after. So we just add that really crisp highlight on the edge of them, really make it look like they're there in the scene. And as I look at it, there's definitely too much light on the top of her head. So I'm going to go back to the really intense linear dodge layer, select that mask, and we're just going to tone that down with the black just a little bit. Just pull it down a little bit. There still should be some glow, just not as intense. And we did too. We took it away too much. We just want there to be a little bit of it in there. Okay, something like that. All right, I'm going to save the document. And now let's go through and just do like our freeform shadow work. So we did the initial shadow on them. And now here's how I would go in and begin working on the other stuff that should be a little bit more shadowy. And again, you can take as much time or as little time doing this as you like. We're going to do it relatively quickly because we're constrained by time. So I go add a curves adjustment layer and we're going to set it to the blend mode multiply. And I'm going to select the layer mask, Command or Control I to inverse that. And then you can do anything you like. So if you still have your guides from your light up, you can use those to inform you or draw new lines for something like the rock. In this case, I'm just going to freeform. So I'm going to come around the base of them first. I'm going to paint. I've got a very subtle brush, opacity of 10, And I'm just going to begin adding like shadow. His foot is lifted up a little bit. Add that shadow underneath his foot. Let's come around here on the backside of her dress. Just in general, we want to darken that up, but I'll really focus on the creases, because if we make those darker, it's just going to serve to add a darkening effect to everything. There's already a natural shadow going up the side of her. Ooh, we made it a little bit too dark there on the back of her arm. I'll probably darken that side of her face a little bit more, the side of his face as well, the back of his head, something like that. Cool. And we're not being quite as precise as we would be if this was real commercial work, but we're getting the job done here, as you're seeing, just darkening that up. And then here with the rocks. So like mentioned by the astute audience member, we would go over and we would use a sharper edge brush, something that's, I don't know, what do we have? 75% hardness. And we would come in here and just start darkening up the stuff that would and should need to be darkened. Right? And part of that would be this entire back side of the rock, this side of the rock over here particularly. Now, we don't want it out there on the green, so this is probably where I would use the lasso tool and do something like just drag along there. And this is going to be rough, but we're going to just go through it quickly here. Go along with something like the lasso tool and just say, yeah, we really don't want shadow out there. So black is my background color. You can fill with the background color using Control and the backspace key. That would be Command Delete if you're on the Mac, Command or Control D to deselect. And we begin just adding this darkening influence to the backside of our rock. And you can really focus on the more dark areas as well. One of the other things that you would do, shadows tend to be less saturated. They tend to be a little lower contrast. So we could also, and what I would do would be to add more darkening, add less, remove some of the contrast, remove some of the saturation. You could do all that with, we can actually do it with the hue saturation adjustment real quick. So we'll just drop the saturation a little bit. We'll drop the brightness a little bit more. Something like so. We could probably even set it to the multiply blend mode as well. Select the mask, Control I, and then begin painting in with this on the back side of the rock as well. Something like so. And just continue working to remove more and more of what needs to be removed. And if you're darkening the rock that much, you need to go and make sure that you're casting the shadow where it needs to be cast. Whoop, not up on her dress. So something like that. And then down here through these nooks and crannies and just everything as you come through here. Will begin to become darker and just look more like it belongs. We would work on bringing out the highlights on just the very top front edges of those stones and things like that. And you can see here as I do this, I'm going to soften this brush a little bit. I'm going to come around through here and just add some general shadows to the environment. We're going to go ahead and take this and reduce the opacity of this layer as well. But just to have a general darkening here won't hurt. And we'll just reduce the opacity and then reduce the opacity of this as well. So you got before and then you've got after. Just serves to darken that and needs a little bit more work, but we're not going to spend much more time on it playing with that. What are we looking at time-wise before we have our shout-out?
We're good, man. I think I love your attention to timing. I'd say another, I was like 4.2 seconds, 4.2 minutes also recurring. So no, we're good for it, 4 minutes so, and then of course, when we're done, we will jump back in and then you can get back in the flow of it.
Right on. Okay. All right. So let's begin the toning process, toning down some of this haze. Actually, no, before we do that, let's add let's add some clusters of birds because they just add a little bit of depth. Yeah. Something else I would do, and this is the kind of thing to think about, and we're going to see it today in our artist showcase. You're creating a composite. So there are things that you can do and avenues you can explore that it wouldn't be easy to do with just if you captured everything in camera. So one of those things, for instance, like let's say this was a client hired me, they wanted this composite for their wedding invitation or something, or some big piece of artwork at their wedding, right? One of the things I would do would be capture photos of like all of their wedding invitations falling through the air, like an old newspaper or something, and put those in the very foreground, like very blurred in the foreground of the image. So you're kind of looking through a falling haze of these wedding invitations through to this wide cinematic shot of this bride and groom saying, "Thank you for celebrating our day with us," and so forth. Nice. So I don't have that material with me. I didn't shoot these photos. Like I said, it's all Adobe Stock. So we're going to work with what we have here. But one of the things that you can do that's kind of value added is add flying creatures, right? The birds. And I like to always throw a little shout out to the bats because the bats always get left in the dark.
I
No
was
pun
wondering
intended.
that. You said bats. I
Um,
was like, oh, I want to see some bats today. Yeah.
so we've got just seagulls on a white background. The type of bird probably doesn't matter that much. And we're going to change the way these look. So we're going to hit Command or Control L to bring up levels. And I'm going to bump the white up a little bit, and then I'm going to bump the black up quite a bit. They don't need to be solid black, but we want them to be pretty black. So we'll hit OK here. And all I need to do is, let me drag this up to the very top. I just set this layer to the blend mode multiply. All right, and we have some birds. And what we can do now is place these wherever we want. So Command or Control T, it's going to say, look, we're going to disable some stuff. I don't care, that's fine. We're going to go tiny little flock of birds way off here around this hill, right? And then we're going to hold down Alt or Option. We're going to duplicate them to like over here, but hit Command or Control T, right click on it, flip them horizontal. Cool. We're going to zoom in on them here. We're going to mask away a couple of them. So I'll add a layer mask. I'm going to grab my brush tool. I'm going to right click and say I do want a hard edged brush. I want the opacity up to 100%. And I want to paint with black as my foreground color. I'm just going to click away a few birds just so it doesn't look like the same stock photo that we used. So just come in here and knock out a few birds. Cool. Something like that.
Just casually knock out a few birds.
They stick out a little bit too much, so I would just reduce the opacity as well, which is going to allow them. Birds are feathers and stuff, right? Even their bones are hollow, so they're practically see-through to begin with. So if you lower the opacity on them, it's probably not going to be that big a deal. So I'll just lower the other bird's opacity as well.
Sorry for any bird lovers in the chat. He does love birds, by the way. It's okay. We're just saying in general.
I actually had that's the pet. That was my pet of choice as a child. I had,
really?
a parrot and a cockatiel. Yeah.
And a bat. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we did have bats in the house, but that wasn't my choice.
Okay.
All right. So we add just a couple clusters of birds off there. That's kind of cool. Maybe also let's look what else we have stock photo wise. We can add a little, well, we can increase we could do something like this. So like I like these sun rays a lot. So something like that, place this over where the sun is. We can see how this works. We double click on this. I'll just name this sun rays. This is a total experiment.
By the way, just to throw it out there, when you're in a good natural spot, I don't want to ruin the flow. We'll jump straight into our artist spot like we're in a good spot. But when you're in a good space.
Okay.
So
all right. Yeah, it'll be 1 minute. All right. So I'm going to hold down Alt or Option and just split this top handle and pull it back and just cause some of the shadowy details of this layer to be revealed. Whoops, I don't want to touch that white. Something like so. And then maybe I would set this to screen or something and hit OK. And then just add a filled layer mask with black, grab my brush tool, make it big and very, very soft, and maybe just like 20%, and just click with white and just see, we add a little bit of a glowing ball there to the middle with some rays that are kind of shooting out around it. So something like so. And you can always reduce the fill a little bit just to really, the sun is still back there, but we just added some more intensity. So, all right, let's take a look at our artist spotlight.
Awesome. Right. So my friends, we have left you long enough without telling you who it was. So today, excuse me, we've got an amazing photographer based in San Francisco. Nathaniel, would like to do the honors and get that up on the tab. And sure. His name is Erik Almas. So all in keeping obviously with our theme for today of, photography composition. And we'll get that up.
I'm bringing it up right now. He is right here.
There's a drum roll in my head, basically.
So Erik Almas, he's a guy from Norway, I believe, Trondheim, I want to say, is where he's from originally. But he works out of San Francisco, as Kieran said.
Carry on, I love it. That's okay. We're close.
I'm so bad with names. I know I'm gonna butcher your name.
No judgment.
I mess up my own name. But this was one of the first guys who years ago I saw his work and was just it's just really cool. I mean, it's technically cool. He tells these stories with triangles, like here's the wolf walking away. And what's he walking away from? The two houses that he blew down, and then the stone house. Right.
Man, that's dark, but awesome.
Right. It's just very cool, well lit composite work. You just go like San Francisco to
Nice.
Maine, right? And you got the people holding hands, nightlife to daytime. So many cool, interesting ideas that this guy has. And you can just see like stuff that we're looking at today. Like, right, you got this edge light coming in. Where's it coming from? Well, it's coming from this artificially blown out sun, right? You got this atmospheric haze in the room. Now, one of the things about Almas and his work is he shoots his photography with the composites in mind. Like, he's got the people on location. He might photograph them in location, but then he's going to photograph his location from multiple angles with different light from different times of the day. And then he's going and building the stuff in Photoshop after the fact, right?
Wow.
So
That's
you're
awesome.
obviously shooting this, and then you're adding snow, and you're changing the colors, and you're getting the perfect poses. This kind of stuff. You've got the tiger. There was one here that I really wanted to show, if I can remember which one it is under. I don't remember. Maybe it's this one. Maybe it's the guy on the horse. But it's just, you can see, a lot of the concepts that we're talking about today. Now, one of the interesting things about the way that Erik shoots his work is he would be out here shooting all of this stuff on the same day. So like the shadow of the boat, that's probably, I would say, the actual shadow of that boat. But that boat would have been photographed probably independent of the models, but the models would have then been photographed in the boat.
Nice.
And just everything along the way. You can tell this kid is compositing. He didn't quite nail the shadow where the sand goes to the legs. So there's little things that give it away that these are composites. But
to the untrained eye, I feel like that it's
right. I was going to say
it's beautiful. It's
far be it
beautiful.
from me to throw stones. That's more of a 3D and video work. There was maybe it's this here.
When you found one, I've actually got one as well, but I'll let you go for yours. But there was one that I got a personal favorite. But yeah.
Well, and you can see like here, there's a lot of this just backlit, right? The image is backlit. The sun's here hitting her in the face, and you've got backlighting like crazy. What do you have?
It was the one in. Let's get this right now. If you scrub a little bit more, it's like that would go with the sort of duvet.
This here.
That's the one. Yeah. And it's weird because I'm gonna say just on that, it was, I think it's scrolling down. It's quite smart how he's got it kind of overlapping the thumbnail.
Yeah.
And I've seen he's done it a few pictures where it's just quite smart how he's used it in the actual context of how he's uploaded.
And this is the kind of thing he does this great on his website too. There's a composite he has of like a train. And it's like one of those like French TGV, the really super fast trains.
Nice.
And it's going up over a book that he has laid out, but it's in the environment and it looks real.
Nice.
So it's
awesome.
just, his work it's just really good, and he does a lot of great stuff, and it's composite work that looks like composite while not looking like composite work. He'll do stuff that's very bright and light and lifestyle airy. He'll do stuff that's very moody, like this. Clearly that's
very cool.
Sorry, I didn't mean to bring up an American flag.
No, we're in a good space. We don't discriminate on this channel. We're good for it.
No, I just make because So there's just a lot of really, really fantastic stuff he has, and yeah.
Nice. That's a nice way to kind of end up on end off on the artist spotlight. So again, thank you so much, Erik, for having your amazing work. I can see Wade, our lovely moderator, has put the link in the chat so you guys can follow up. And of course, if you see yourselves obviously, hopefully being featured, or some friends, we've got our lovely tab in the artist on the Adobe Live on the Behance. Click on there, submit yourself, submit a friend, and who knows who could be on for the next Adobe Live. So yeah, for until then, obviously we'll stay tuned for the next Adobe Live artist spotlight. But yeah, we're back into your world, Nathaniel. We've got about 20 minutes or so, and then we're good for it. And then we'll do a nice little roundup, of course, to know how we can reach out to you too.
Okay, great. Sounds good.
Cool.
All right, so we've added some birds. We're going to add a little bit more atmosphere with maybe some foreground smokiness. And there's a lot of different ways you can add this, but I just had this stock photo sitting around, so we'll apply this here. I'm going to hold down Shift and just stretch it out. It's a bit more than we need, so I'll also stretch it down this way and bring it down. It's shot over a nice dark solid black background, so I can just set it to screen and the black will go away and we just have kind of this smokiness. Nice. You can of course go in with this type of elements, and you can blur it a little if you want. It's already kind of by its nature appears blurry, but you could go and let's say you didn't want the smoke appearing as strongly over the highlights underlying. So you could just say, hey, the underlying layer, I want to pull back the power of this effect on the highlights, right? Like her dress. And you can see it's given us that really kind of like chunky effect. That's where you hold down your Alt or Option key, click that little handle to split it, and then just fade it the way you want it to be. So we can see before and after. So it makes a big difference there. And then I would probably just reduce the overall opacity of it. We're just looking to add a little bit of haze and atmosphere. And then one of the ways that we're going to help direct the attention is by using some gradients. And I know it doesn't seem all that intuitive, but some well-placed gradients can really help draw the eye where you want the eye to go in an image. So we're going to make sure black is our foreground color here, because we're going to be doing a foreground to transparent gradient. And we're going to use a gradient adjustment layer. Well, it's not an adjustment layer, it's a gradient fill layer, speaking technically. And here we go. We've got it just coming up from the bottom, solid black. And you can click and drag the gradient. So you can drag it up or drag it down. I'll probably drag it down kind of like that. Something like that looks good. We'll hit OK. And then I'll try setting this to the blend mode of what does soft light look like? What does overlay look like? I might go overlay. Let me see. Yeah, overlay, maybe reduce the opacity a little bit. We're just trying to lift the eyes up the frame, right? Don't get distracted by this junk in the foreground. If we wanted stuff to be in the foreground we want you to look at, we would put it in and you know, blur it or something, which we could do. We could, you know, add some flax or big grass that's shooting up in the foreground. And then at this point, I think we're at the point where we would begin our sort of final toning and grading and sharpening. And there's a lot of different ways you can do this. By the way, this would also be the time when you would do your dodging and burning if you wanted to create, there's a lot of kind of composite work that has like this plasticky effect, which can be cool. I'm not hating it at all, but it's not what we're going to do here with this image. But this would be the point when you would do that and begin just, you know, smoothing all the tones out, all of that kind of stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to merge everything we have up to a new layer. So Control Shift Alt and the letter E, that would be Command Shift Option E on the Mac. And we have this layer. We're going to call this toning. And I'm going to convert it to a smart object so we can go and play with it later if we want to. So we're going to convert to smart object. And we are now going to go filter, camera raw filter. So by converting it to a smart object, we're going to be able to apply our camera raw filter and then be able to, and then go back in and adjust it later if we so wish. So we're going to zoom in and take a look at what we've got. A lot of stuff here. The birds are probably a little bit too opaque, a little bit too big as well. But we're not gonna make that adjustment right now. All right, so I'm just looking around here. I like what we've got. Cool. I'm gonna zoom back out. And we're going to begin here in the calibration tab. So calibration is really interesting, and it allows you to work with color in a very interesting way. It's kind of the way, how do I put this in a non-technical hoity-toity term? It's kind of the way that like Camera Raw is going to interpret the colors that it's being told are there. So you can basically say like, hey, I want all my reds to be more pink. All right. Not what we want here, but you could do that. I want them to be more orange, right? It's not what we want here, but it's interesting. So what we'll do is I am going to push the red primary toward the orange a little bit. You can also desaturate or increase the saturation of certain parts of the image. And like this is, I mean, like you said before, Lord of the Rings, a Hobbit kind of vibe. I mean, you really start walking down that fantasy mythical world when you do this. Now, this is a little bit, you know, microwaved, but you can kind of see how you can get that real intensity of color. Now, the one thing that I would caution you is when you're doing something like this is where you start to cash the check of earlier worrying about like the saturation of your subject. Because if we hadn't reduced their saturation, she's already too saturated. But if we hadn't reduced the saturation, they would be looking like they're, you know, space creatures. So that's where that becomes helpful. Now, we're not increasing the saturation to that degree, but we're moving in that direction. All right, so then we've got our green primary, and same thing. Do you want it to be more magenta, more green? We want it to be more green. We'll maybe increase the saturation of that a little bit as well. If you want to see before and after, you click and hold the little eyeball. There's before, there's after, before, after. So you can see how we're really just juicing that color. One interesting thing that I know a lot of photographers do, a lot of landscape photographers, in fact, is they will just desaturate the blues entirely and see what that does to the image. It sometimes will lend some interesting effects, color grading effects, that is, when you're playing around with your post-production. I'm not going to do much with the blue slider here. Push it a little bit more toward blue purples, but I'll leave it kind of like that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in, get to 100%. Or more even. And I'm going to go here to detail, and we're going to open up the sharpening. So hit that little arrow, and we're going to add sharpening. Now I'm going to hold down my Alt key while I sharpen. That's going to just strip away all the color and give me a temporary black and white and allow me to really focus on, all right, how are we sharpening this here? All right, so I'm going to push that up to about 60. You can see, and maybe I'll go to 200% here. On her face, right, you can just, there's all that crunchy texture all over her skin. It looks very... it just doesn't look very good. You're not really going to notice it if you're not looking at it completely zoomed in, but we can do something about it if we hold down the Alt or Option key and choose our masking slider. As this mask appears, the white areas are the areas that Camera Raw thinks there is big change in color and brightness, really probably brightness, just big tonal value shifts. And sharpness would mean that on the edges of those tonal value shifts, we have a slight increase in contrast, thereby making our image look sharper. So like all these areas that are white, those are all the areas that Camera Raw is saying we found an edge. So we're going to say right there's probably about good, because like the middle of her hair, right, we could see that that's solid black. That means it's blocking out the sharpening from just up here in the middle of her hair. And Photoshop, or in this case Lightroom, or Camera Raw, excuse me, but Lightroom does this as well. If you add sharpness to just a big block of color, all you're going to be doing is sharpening the noise that happens to be there. So we don't really want that unless we want to bring the noise out. I would rather introduce our own grain later and have some control over exactly what that grain is doing. So that's probably good for the sharpness here. We'll zoom back out a little bit. Cool. And actually back under detail, we'll close up sharpening. I'm going to go back to 200 or 300% here. I want to do some noise reduction. So I'm going to just increase the noise reduction here. And you're going to see this is going to naturally smooth her skin and give her a little bit of that very plasticky look. Now, if we get the really plasticky look, if we go really far, we don't want that. But we just want to just kind of soften away some of that noise and make her skin look a little bit softer, a little bit more natural from afar. So go back to 100%. It's too much noise reduction. We don't want her to look completely airbrushed. So something like that.
By the way, Nathaniel, sorry to interrupt my bro, because I mean, by all means, I feel like I could watch another 2 hours of a stream of this because the process is absolutely insane. We've got about 10 more minutes, I'd say, but it'd be great because obviously I want to do like a nice little recap of what we've done, and even more importantly, how our lovely audience can even reach out and know more about you.
All right. So there's one last little tonal thing here that I want to show you, and then we'll just go back over everything we've done from the start. So then up here under basic, we got a little bit of color changing that we can do, color temperature changing. I'm going to add a little bit more magenta. We'll drop the overall exposure just a tiny bit. We're going to drop the blacks a little bit. That's going to increase the contrast in the shadows. We will increase our texture and our clarity a little bit. Clarity, as I described yesterday, is kind of like a cross between, or like the slider that would be between clarity and sharpness. And then dehaze, this is going to help take some of that color haze out of the sky that we introduced. All right, so just something like so is pretty cool, and you can play with your vibrance. I'm not going to do anything with vibrance. Hit OK. And then once we bring this back in, the two quick final things that I would do, I would add a solid color, and this would just be, pick a tone you like, maybe like some kind of orange, set it to the blend mode of color, and reduce the opacity way down. I mean like 3, 4, 5%, something like that. It just is going to add it just helps pull everything together a little bit more. And then the last thing would be, you usually want to add some element of finishing grain to your image. We're not going to do that here though, because that's just, I mean, actually you could come in here into Camera Raw and do it this way. I probably wouldn't do it here, but you could go into Camera Raw, go down to effects, zoom into 100% and just say, here, I want some grain. I want the size to be a little bit bigger. This just tends to soften out some of those colors. Remember, I talked about 8-bit before and getting banding. This can help get rid of some of your banding as well, things like that. So just reduce the grain a little bit. helps pull together all the colors on the edges, things like that. And that's pretty cool. And then, you could do a final thing here. This is just kind of a little fun, add a little texture to something like this,
Nice.
particularly because it's your image or your composite. Stretch it out, pull it up just a little bit, something like that. And then you would just set this to the blend mode of like multiply and, reduce the opacity a little bit. And you get something kind of cool like that as well. Not that would necessarily be a commercial look, but it could just be an interesting thing. And you can see when you add that noise, grain, texture effects on top of your composite, you end up really pulling it all together. And now they really look like they belong there. So yeah, let's go over what we did. So we, I'm going to save this here. Let me try to save it again. If it's not going to save, I don't need to save it. But
I wouldn't be able to sleep properly if I knew you never saved this beautiful work correctly. Yeah. It's always save my folks.
All right, so I can collapse my properties panel here. Let's go back to square one. Well, we began, if you recall correctly, with just a blank document. And why we began with a blank document was because we wanted to bring in our own pieces of background artwork. And this is what we brought in. We brought in all of this stuff. We started with what we thought would be our central image. And like I said, Adobe Stock, they have series of photos. So a lot of times you can find a landscape photographer who shot what appeared to be a bunch of photos from the same location. We started piecing them together. We worked on the trees on the hillside a little bit, which I still feel like I should have spent some more time on, but we got time limitations. We built a foreground here with a bunch of different stones and rocks. We added some dodging to just lift the shadowy areas a little bit. We healed to take away sun rays from what would have been a second sun. You don't want a second sun. We toned down those highlights over there, used blend if to really constrain our highlights just to the tips of the trees and bushes and whatnot. Then we masked away the sky. After we masked away the sky, we went and we added a gradient of the sky behind it. Those colors came from the sky that was already in these photos. We just wanted to create one continuous, clean, empty sky. We added a little bit of glow at the horizon because that's where glows usually are. We softened the contrast of the entire background. Then we cut in our couple. You can see just how dark that image is compared with our image now. Then we went through. We adjusted the brightness contrast. We adjusted the saturation. We adjusted the color tones. We added some shadows. Remember all that business? We added our sun. So it begins with the bright center of the sun, the first glow, the second glow. And again, you can go in, blend if is helpful for stuff like that. Then we changed the color on the ground around where they're standing. So if I zoom in on that, you can see there it is blue. And then we made it kind of more brown to sort of just match the vibe of the whole image a little bit better. And then we did our little edge lighting with these 3 color layers. So we really give that sizzle to the edge of them to really pick up some of that sunlight coming across. We went ahead and we added to the shadows in our environment. Voila. And then we further added to the shadows and took away from the saturation with that hue saturation layer. We added some seagulls, or just what they look like in their silhouette, regular birds. We intensified the sun a little bit more. And what else did we do? We added that foreground smoke. We added that foreground darkening to just, hey, lift your eyes up, look at our subject. We went ahead and did our toning, which, by the way, of course, we can go in and edit in Camera Raw. You can also just reduce the opacity of it. If you do it and you're like, I want to bring that back down a little bit. Then we added our orange layer just to pull things together a little bit more, right? You add that to really pull things together. And then just for funsies at the end, we added a little bit of texture just like that. I actually probably would bump the texture.
Dude, this is a solid 5%. Session. My God. I haven't seen so much work into the process in that short space of time.
So that's
sort of see it come alive. It's been incredible. Absolutely.
That's what we did. Yeah. So that's.
I can see the comments in the chat. Absolutely, everyone's been. Mariam, Robert, everyone's been saying great session. We've got Marshall said I'm going to watch this again and again for sure. Nathaniel, you're trending, buddy, because I feel like everyone's going to be loving what you're doing and sort of see that process.
Cool. No, I'm glad.
But I would love. We've got about a solid. It's very short, but 2.5 minutes to show some website or anything that our friends can kind of follow up on. Because I'd love to know how our friends can kind of know more information about yourself after the stream.
So you can of course you can subscribe to me on YouTube. That's this website here. Tutvid is my channel. And like I said, if you're a photographer or a graphic designer, a logo designer, if you do anything with a camera, video, or still, there'll probably be stuff here that you'll like. I do some video editing stuff, some After Effects stuff. a lot on Photoshop and Illustrator. But yeah, so that's a good place to follow me. Also, I just started a new Instagram. My old Instagram was hacked, and Facebook couldn't help me get it back because of a two-factor authentication issue. So I've learned my lesson, but I lost all my followers over there. So you can go and join. There's only like 1,300 people there, and I haven't been posting a lot. But the plan is to get right. The plan is always to get posting more there. So that's probably the best place to follow me is on the YouTube channel or Instagram. And then I have my photography website, but there's not much you're going to get out of that unless you're looking to hire me for some photo work or something. Yeah, so that's the best place. And I am on Behance as well. Nice. You can check out some stuff there. I don't have a lot that I put up there, but there is a little bit of a presence on Behance as well. It's something I should do more. Behance is a great little portfolio site, but yeah, so that's probably
it's
the
a
best
full-time
place
job, right? Social media, trying to like maintain and keep it going. It's a thing, right? I get it. I feel your
yeah, it's like the Gary Vee. Every big piece of content you create, it's like I can get 200 smaller pieces of content out of this, but I'm gonna spend a week editing 12-second video clips or something.
Oh, we get it. And again, if anyone, I feel like if there's any maybe soon to be married couples, they could be reaching out to you to do the invites, to do their branding. I don't know, but I mean, if it's a wedding kind of focus,
I mean, yeah, whatever you.
It's that season, dude.
If it's
Christmas is coming, I don't know.
I try to be the creative Swiss Army knife a little bit. So if it's something that falls into the wheelhouse, it's definitely something that. That I can do, but I'm also very busy. So it's, if it's something I can take it. But ever since COVID, I've been doing a little bit less work out in the field just because things have gotten a little bit more expensive. Production just naturally has gotten more difficult because of all the different countermeasures people have been taking. So there's just a lot, it's a lot more complicated, and you're trying to make sure you're respecting everyone's boundaries a little bit. It's not just like, hey, throw this up on Craigslist and get some people to show up for a photo shoot. There's like additional stuff now that everyone's asking. And so it is what it is. But cool. Yeah, it's a ton of fun. I mean, how can you not have fun doing this stuff?
Exactly. And I know I can feel like, again, the comments been absolutely amazing. I feel like I can speak on behalf of everyone where it's been an absolute pleasure to see your process, hear about yourself as a designer as well, and see obviously what inspires you. So on that note, my friends, so stay around because you can stick around for the Illustrator Creative Challenge with Jack Watson, and immediately following these challenges, stick around for an episode of How To with my good friend Clady from Print My Soul. And there you can learn how to design a holiday greeting card. It's that season, guys, right? It's that season. And then followed by a new episode of Let's InDesign with my other awesome friend, Anika Alawal. So on that note, Nathaniel, it's been a pleasure, my buddy, to host you. Thank you so much for coming in for the past 2 days. Of course, audience, if it wasn't for you guys, there is no stream. Our moderators, thank you as well. And of course, we'll see you for the next Adobe Live. So take care, my friends, and we'll see you very, very soon. Ciao, ciao.